Good afternoon, everyone. I decided to do the live out here today because it's so pretty. I don't know where you're tuning in from, but here in Florida, it is absolutely beautiful on the Gulf Coast today. And I'm super grateful for the weather. I feel like it's God's little prick, little reminder of hope in the midst of being socially quarantined and social distancing. It's just gorgeous out today. So I hope y'all are doing well. Today is part 2 of Cultivating Calmness in Motherhood. And yesterday we unpacked and explored the first part of Cultivating Calmness, which was finding clarity in your calmness, in your calling as a mother. And we explored 3 ways to do that. Realizing that cultivating is a process, a patient one that takes some time. Get alone if you can, and spend some time with the Lord and reflect on your calling. And number 3, combing through the chaos of every season and covering yourself in God's grace. So today let's dive into the second part of Cultivating Calmness in Motherhood, which is acknowledging your weaknesses and asking for help. I do not know about you, but I find it very difficult to acknowledge my weaknesses. I think that's human nature, but I also think that's part of being a mom. As a mom, we can sometimes wrap ourselves in our identity in our children and what we do around the home, when in reality, our identity is not in our motherhood. Our identity is a daughter of the King. So remember that. Your identity is not wrapped up in how you parent or even how you're mothering. You are a daughter of the King, and that is your identity. So the first weakness that I have as a mother, and I'm sure many of you do, is the comparison trap / need for perfection. When I was a young mother, I felt this overwhelming need to prove myself to other seasoned mothers or mothers who might have been just slightly more seasoned than me. And to some extent, I think we all feel that way. We easily fall into the comparison trap of the mom next door, our best friend, the mom at church, or that perfect mom at Target who can corral 4 kids all while drinking a latte and look super perfect, while you can barely corral your 2 kids and you're wearing yesterday's yoga pants and last week's shirt and don't even remember when you had coffee last, and probably a 3-month-old chipped pedicure. True story. And I have compared myself to every mother under the sun, and it's dangerous. It's dangerous. And I know that little anecdote probably doesn't sound much like a weakness, but comparing yourself to what you could be or should be is in fact a weakness, because that's not what God has called you to. And anything that we are grasping for that's not putting our strength and our eyes on what God has called us to in motherhood is a weakness. So how do we fix that practically? How do we acknowledge our weaknesses and ask for help when it is so difficult to do? Well, number 1, remember your calling. Going back to what we explored yesterday, asking God to help you reaffirm your calling, His calling on your life as a mother. Ask Him to give you clarity and reaffirm that. Number 2, this one's hard. Ask Him to help you rejoice in those weaknesses. Why? Well, because of 2 Corinthians 2:19. 2 Corinthians 2:19. He said to me, "My strength is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness." And Paul says, "Therefore I will boast all the more gladly of my weakness, so that the power of Christ may rest upon me." So, Mama, when you rejoice in those weaknesses, when you acknowledge them, you boldly proclaim His strength and make His calling in your motherhood clear in your life, giving you that clarity by acknowledging your weaknesses. Rejoice in that. I know it's tough. I have to do it every day. It's not a one and done. It's an everyday thing. Lord, help me to acknowledge my weakness and proclaim your strength so I can do the things you've called me to do. It's not easy to acknowledge, but it's an essential part of cultivating a calm spirit, because when you do that, you can rest in that power and let him take over and give you the strength for that. Number 2, so 1, remember your calling. 2nd, accept your need for strength and ask the Lord for help. I really love 1 John 5:14. This is the confidence that we have toward him, that if we ask anything according to his will, he hears us. So we know already that his will right now for us is to be mom. And then we each have our unique sub-callings in that. And so if we're asking for help in what he's already calling us to do, he's going to give us the strength to do that because he promises to do it. So we ask him for help. 2nd, we ask for help from our friends and our family. Sometimes this is difficult, not so much from family because, they're with us all the time. And some of our friends are with us all the time too, but it's really hard to acknowledge your weakness and ask for help to somebody that, you're friends with, but you don't really acknowledge, verbally say your weaknesses. And it's hard to do that because when you say them, they become so much more real. And the moment you acknowledge them and speak the truth about them, it's like, oh man, I know it and now I have to do something about it. And that's really hard. But there are people that want to help you. So think about in your life somebody who walks alongside of you. Ask them for help, because here's the thing. If we don't ask for help and we keep all of that suppressed, it can turn into ugly emotions like depression and anger and anxiety. And here's the thing. If we don't acknowledge that anxiety and we don't acknowledge and relinquish that anxiety, we're going to remain stationary in our life and the Holy Spirit can't work. Therefore, having that anxious spirit is going to lead to an actionless life. We won't go anywhere. We can't allow the Holy Spirit to work. And the Holy Spirit has wonderful things to do in your life. Everyone has a calling from the Lord. And if we're letting that fear and anxiety squash that calmness that the Holy Spirit wants to do, we won't be able to allow him to work in our life. So, ask friends and family for help. Someone who listened to your desire for help, take your hand and walk you right into God's grace. So summing up, today we talked about acknowledging weakness and asking for help. And I want to leave you with a reminder. This is really encouraging to me. From Isaiah 41:10, which you probably well know, "Fear not, for I am with you. Be not dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you, I will help you, I will uphold you with my righteous right hand." So I want to encourage you, here's your action plan for today. Get alone and write down 1 to 2 weaknesses, just 1 to 2, because if we sat down and wrote them all, we'd be super depressed and it would just take a long time. I know it would for me. Write down 1 to 2 main ones that just come to you that are weighty on your spirit. Then pray over them. Give them to the Lord, relinquish them, and rest that he's got it. But then I want you to share them with your closest friend, someone that you often share with, pray with, talk with. I know I already have my person in my mind and she's probably watching right now. That encourages you to walk in your walk with the Lord. Ask them to speak truth in life into the times when your weakness becomes very apparent and very bold in front of them, and ask them to call you back to that truth and that calmness. Ask them to call you back to remember your calling as a mom, remember your calling as a daughter of the King. Remember, cultivating calmness is an everyday process, and we must rely on God's grace in that process. So be encouraged, Mama. Tomorrow we're going to talk about limiting distractions and learning to trust. So until then, rest, Mama, trust, and enjoy your kiddos today. Be well.